Hey everybody, welcome to homerecordingmadeeasy.com, visionrecordingstudios.com, and here on my YouTube channel. And today I want to talk to you about mixing templates. I did a video about templates maybe a year and a half ago or so in PreSonus Studio One, which a lot of you have checked out and you wrote some nice comments about, and I appreciate that. Thank you. But today I have updated my mixing template over the last year and a half to include some things that maybe weren't in the first video. And because this time I'm doing it in another DAW because I'm mixing a project for a client, which requires me to use a different DAW. And I'm going to be mixing multiple songs across an entire EP. And I want to have the same template for each song to help my workflow. So we're going to do this in Cubase 8 Pro today. But you can do this in Pro Tools, Studio One, Logic, Cubase, doesn't matter. The process is very, very similar, the way you set up a template and save a template. And the reason why you want to save templates is so when you're going from one project to another, a lot of the setup work of a session could be done for you ahead of time. So normally it would take anywhere from 30 to maybe minutes to an hour to set up each template from scratch. If we were looking at a blank screen like we're looking at here, to add your routing and your buses and your inputs and your outputs and add your basic plugins that are staples that you're always going to be using. It could take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour to set that up, and this will save you an enormous amount of time once you start using templates. And once you create a template, it doesn't always have to stay static. It can change and update as you move further down your mixing career path here, and or as you get new tools, new plugins, you can change things around, which I have done. So I'm going to set one up for you from scratch so you can see how we do it in Cubase and kind of give you some ideas on what I'm doing, and maybe you can use that into your workflow. So let's take a look at Cubase 8 here, and you're looking at a blank screen here. This is a blank empty session, which I haven't even named yet. I'm going to start off by naming this. This is what your DAW will look like, the edit screen with nothing in it. I'm just going to save this and I'm going to call this in my Vision template folder that I created. I'm going to call this analog mix template, and I'll explain that in a second. So and you may have a template. Can't talk and type at the same time. You may have a template for mixing. You may have a template for recording. I do. My mixing template and my tracking template are going to be completely different. Well, not completely different, but there's going to be some differences between them. So you can have as many templates as you want. So it's nice to have several different templates depending on what your project is going to be for that particular session. So here we are. We're going to set up an analog mixing template. So the first thing we're going to do, which I've already done, but I want to show you this because it's in every DAW, it's a little different. We're going to set the inputs and outputs. So in Cubase, you go to Devices and VST Connections. And on our input side, we're going to set up the inputs depending on your interface, how you're going to route your audio. And yours is going to be different from mine for sure. And I've already done that. I got an Vision analog mixing routing. So on my inputs, because I'm using analog summing, I am routing my audio out of my interface, out of the DAW, through an analog summing amplifier, and then back into the DAW. So my inputs are coming in on channels 7, 8, which is the return channel of the summed audio after it's come out of the summing amplifier. So that's coming in on 7, 8, and I'm using a Universal Audio Apollo, which is my interface of choice. And on my outputs, I have several different outputs. I have a SPDIF output, which is after the audio comes back into my DAW and gets processed, it goes out. My stereo outs is really I'm using the SPDIF connection. So I'm using the SPDIF out left and right. And then I'm using some stems. And because, again, I'm using a Dangerous Music D box, I have 4 stereo pairs of stems for analog summing, which we'll get into in another video. But I have a drum and bass stem going out on outputs 1 and 2, a guitar stem going out on outputs 3 and 4, a keyboard or string stem going out on 5 and 6, and a vocal stem going out on 7 and 8. So that's my output. So now I saved that as a preset, which you can do in any DAW. So my outputs are going to be saved no matter every time I bring up this template, I don't have to reroute everything. It's already saved. So that's the first thing that I do, is set up my routing for my audio going out and audio coming back in. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, well, what do I typically use in every single session? Well, I know for me, I use a busing channel system where I'll route my individual groupings of instruments to buses. So for example, my drum kit, my kick, snare, toms, overheads, and room mics will all be bused to, say, a drum bus, and then from there it'll go out the main outputs. So I know I'm going to want to add at least some buses for my drums. I'm going to add a bus for my parallel drum compression. So let's start there. So let's, in Cubase, you just right click and you go to add a folder, add a group track. Let me find that here. Here it is, add group channel track. And again, every DAW is a little bit different. And we're going to add, these are going to be stereo. So let's go ahead and let's add, say 6 of them, and we'll take you through how I'm going to name these. Okay, so here's my 6 group tracks and my 6 buses. So as I said, I'm going to have one for my drums. So let me call this drum bus. Okay, and I know I'm going to have a bus for parallel drum compression. Almost in every mix, I'm using some sort of parallel drum compression on drums. So I call that P drums for parallel drum compression. My third bus I'm going to use is, I typically like to set up a bass bus because a lot of times I get projects where I'll have a bass DI and a bass amplifier, or a bass DI with a bass and then a second channel that has like a distortion on it, like a grittiness. And sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. But again, we can eliminate these buses from project to project depending on what our project calls for. But just to get a starting point, I'm going to do a bass bus as well. And then I'm going to set up, after that, some guitar buses. I'm going to do one for acoustic guitar, one for electric. So acoustic guitar bus, and then I'm going to set one up for electric guitar. Okay, now I'm going to add some more here. I'm going to add a group channel. I'm going to add, let's add a few more. Okay, so I'm also going to add a keyboard / string bus. If I have keyboards and strings in a track, I may set one bus up for keys and then a separate bus up for strings. But again, for the template purposes, I'm just going to call it keys bus. Okay, and then I'm going to also add one for vocals. I'm going to go I'm going to put my lead vocal on its own separate bus. And then I'm going to do background vocals on another. Okay, and then the last one for now, we could pull a percussion bus. Oh geez, sorry about that. So sometimes we have percussion, sometimes we don't. I will drag that over, oops, under near my drums, MIP drum bus. Okay, so now if I go to my mixer view, it'll show here, and again, your DAW will do the same thing. It'll show my routing, it'll show my buses, and it will show my, in my case, my outputs, my stems. So over here in green, the green fader is my input. That's the stereo 7/8 return that we talked about, that brings the audio from the summing amp back into Cubase or Studio One or whatever program you're using. And then here's the buses that we just set up. So we set up the drum bus, the P drums, parallel drum compression, the percussion bus, bass, acoustic guitar, electric guitars, keys, lead vocals, background vocals. And then over here it shows my outputs. And again, your DAW may or may not show your inputs and outputs in your mixer view. Mine does here. Studio One does. I don't know if Logic, I believe Logic does as well. And so you should be able, I'm not sure, depending on your DAW, you may not see your outputs. But here's my stems and the red faders here. So I have my stereo output, my SPDIF out. Then I have my bass stem, my guitar stem, my keyboard stem, and my vocal stem. Again, that may not apply to you if you're not doing analog summing. If you're not doing analog summing, you won't even have these outputs. You'll just have, say, a master out or a stereo output, as opposed to having stems. And if you're doing that, you wouldn't have a stereo return either. Okay, so now let's take a look at the routing here. So now that I have my buses set up, I want to get those routed properly. so I don't have to do this later on and every single time. So I'm going to click on my routing. And as you can see here, we have an input and an output. Right now, everything is being routed to the SPDIF out, which is not correct for my drum bus. We don't want any inputs yet because I have no audio tracks yet, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But my outputs for my drum bus and for my P drums and for my bass are all going to go to the drum bass stem, which is right here. Okay. My bass is also going to go to the drum bass stem. And then my acoustic guitars and electric guitars and are all going to go to the guitar bus or stem, guitar stem. And then our keyboards, keyboards are going to go to the keyboard stem. And then the lead vocals and the background vocals are going to go to the vocal stem. Okay, so now everything is going out to these stems, which are the red faders. And then from there, those are going out of my interface, back through my summing device, then into channel 7 and 8 here after it's been summed. And then from there, it's going to go to a print track where I'm going to print the final mix. So I need to add a print track. Again, you won't need to do this in yours necessarily, but I need to do it in mine. So let me close my mixer. And over in my tracks, let me right click and go add an audio track, because I need to add an audio track called print track. And that is going to be where I'm going to print my audio after it comes back in from the summing amp. I'm going to color it red because that's typically what I do. And then if I go back to my mixer, you will see it right here called print track with the white fader. Pretty cool. Now I know that I need to keep the monitor button on in order to hear that, and I'm going to leave that on. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is I know that I'm going to have a bank of effects, reverbs, delays, so on and so forth in every single mix. I'm not really sure exactly which reverbs and delays all the time, but I know I'm going to have them. So let's right click over here and let's add some effects channels. Here's an effects channel. Okay, and we're going to add these one at a time. I'm not going to add the effect, it's a stereo. And then I'm just going to right click on it, and I think I can duplicate it. Yes, I can. So I'm going to add 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to have 6 effects for now, because I know that I'm going to have reverbs and delays, so on and so forth. Now I know that I'm going to use three types of reverb and delay on the vocals. So I'm just going to rename these appropriately for my session. And then I have a hall reverb I'm going to use. And then I'm going to use a vocal delay of some kind. I'm going to probably use a drum reverb of some sort, usually. And I also know I use a bass. A lot of times I use a bass chorus. I use the bass Dimension D, Roland Dimension D by Universal Audio. So I know I'm going to use that. So if I go back to my mixer view now, I will see in light blue, because that's the way I have it set up, all my effects channels. Okay, so you kind of get the hang of this now. So when I open up this template again, and I'm going to import some audio from a client session, I'm already going to have my buses already set up. I'm going to have all the effects channels already set up, even though the plugins aren't there yet. I'm going to have all my routing set up to my buses. So all this little tedious work is going to be done. Now I need to route my effects, not out the SPDIF out, but in my case, I'm going to send it to the effects. Oh, sorry. No, that's true. I'm going to let it go to the SPDIF out for now. I'm going to change that in a little bit and I'll show you. So now what I like to do is I like to add, I'm going to close my mixer again. I like to add some, let me close this folder and just kind of clean this up a little. Color coordinate. I like to add some audio tracks. And the reason why I want to add some just blank audio tracks is I know, and again, this is going to change from project to project, but I know that, you know, for the most part, most of my sessions I'm going to get are going to have a drum kit. They're going to have bass guitars, acoustic guitars, electric guitars, so on and so forth. So I'm going to add a bunch of tracks to kind of start myself off with. So down here, I'm going to just go add audio track. We're going to add some mono tracks. Okay. And I'm going to add, let's say we're going to have a kick, 2 snare, top and bottom, say 3 toms, couple of overheads, couple of room mics, bass guitar, say say 4 electric guitars or acoustic, between electric and acoustic, maybe a lead vocal, maybe some background vocals, you know, maybe a couple of other utility tracks. So I'm going to add, say, 25 mono tracks to my project. Okay. We're going to add those in, and here they are all down here. Now, we're not going to name them all because I don't know what they're all going to be yet, obviously, but we're going to have 25 tracks. I'm going to take these and I'm going to reorient them so they're at the top of the project. It's just because that's the way I like to work, but you're going to do something different, I'm sure. Okay, and now I have 25 tracks that are labeled audio tracks. And if I go to my mixer, we're going to see those down here. Oops. Okay, before my bus channels, I have my inputs and then all. Okay, so now let's take a look at adding some inserts. There are certain plugins that I know that I'm going to be using on this project, the entire EP. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my virtual tape machine by Slate Digital. That is the first one I'm going to add. I'm going to group a bunch of tracks here and see if I can. Let's do like 10 at a time here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add the virtual tape machines by Slate Digital. So it's going to go ahead and it's going to add, I think I grouped 8 or 10 tracks here. So it's going to add all 10 inserts, and I'm going to close all these windows with a key command. Hopefully it'll all close. It should. Okay, there we go. So now we got a tape machine on all these tracks here. Let me go ahead and add some more. Try to do this in smaller groupings so our little computer here doesn't get funky. So again, we'll add and this is something that'll just, again, save you time. This step, all these steps that we're taking here at the length of this video is something that you would have to do on every single session that I would open up. So if I'm mixing a record for a band, an entire record, entire album, or CD, or whatever you call it nowadays, I'd have to set this up every single time. So I want to do this and set it up as a template. It just makes sense. It's going to really speed up the workflow. Okay, getting close to the end on the slate, and then what we'll do is we'll just do the last few tracks here. Tape machine. And we're going to close them all. Okay, so we'll save this. So now we have on all 25 tracks, and again, we may be using 22 tracks, we may be using 30 tracks, but on all our tracks, we have the same plugin that I know I'm going to use on every single track. The next one I'm going to use is, I know I'm going to use the console emulator, the NLS by Waves. Playing out with that as a new console emulator. So let's put that on the tracks as well. So again, let's do this, see if I think the Waves will behave a little nicer. So let's go ahead and do NLS, and we're going to put the mono channel on every one of the tracks. Again, it's going to open them all up, and with the stroke of a key, it closes. That's how it should perform. The Slate Digital stuff in 64-bit mode still is kind of janky, which is one of the reasons why I'm not using the VCC on this particular project. I'm using the NLS is because the VCC. So it's putting of all of our console emulators. So now we have a tape machine and we have a console emulator on all of our 25 tracks. And I know that on my master bus, which is my stereo out, or your stereo out, which is my stereo return, again, due to analog summing, think of this as your stereo output right here. I'm going to start off with my NLS bus plugin, bus stereo. Okay. And I also know that I'm going to group this in a way so I'm going to go to VCA group 1, and if you don't know about the NLS, just check out the plugin. I'll do a review on this soon. I'm going to set this up and route it properly so everything is routed to the same thing here. So I'm going to go in on all, and again, so all this whole video, I'm doing this in real time on purpose. I'm wasting your time purposely because I want you to see in real time how long it takes to set up a session from the beginning to the end before you even import the audio. You may lose sight of how long it actually takes. Okay, so now we have our stereo NLS console emulator with our channel, much like the VCC. This is the SSL console. Probably going to start off with the Neve, just because. We're going to do it down here with the groups. It'll switch everything. I'm going to go to the Nevo and do the Neve console on this particular this track I'm going to be doing. Okay, so now I got my tape machine. I got my channel strip. Okay, or my console emulator. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set up. I know I'm going to put a plug-in on my P drums. I'll save this for parallel drum compression, and I typically will use the Universal Audio 1176. So let me go to my okay, that's typically what I'm going to use, and I'm going to go ahead and set it up the way I normally set up my parallel drum compression bus to start. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to save this. I also know that on my drum bus, I'm going to use a compressor of some kind. And because I'm using, let's see, on this one, I'm probably going to use the Fairchild, which is something that I typically use when I do drum bus compression. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? I'm going to start off with this, and I might change this. It depends. I might change this as we go. But again, to get us started. That's all we're trying to do, is to get us started here. So I got my drum bus compressor, okay? And now I also know, oops, I forgot to put on my stereo, my master out, I forgot to put my tape machine, because I know I'm going to do that as well. Go to default here. We're going to put the tape machine on here. On the half-inch 2-track. Okay, we're going to save that. So now I got a template all set up. 25 audio tracks, no stereo tracks yet. I can add those later. I have all my buses all routed correctly, and I have all my effects channels waiting for effects to be put on here, which I won't waste your time in doing that right now. I got my print track set up for when I'm going to print my mix, and now I have, which is probably at this point, a 20-minute video. So you can assure that it would take anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes to add all of this at the beginning of every session. So this is a way to be able to do this very quickly. Set it up once, save it as a template. I'll show you how to do that in a second. Let me just change my input routing here to no bus, because we don't want anything here. Quick link this, and we have, oops, no bus across all the channels. Okay, save. So now once you get everything set up and you want to save this as a template, so now every time I open this up, this is going to open up just like this, and then I can start building my session. Just going to go to File. We're going to go to Save as Template. Every DAW will be a little different, but that's a good way to start. And I'm going to call this one down here Vision 2. Okay, so now if I were to just close this, just as an example, so we're going to close this, we're going to save the session. Let's close it. And now if I was going to create a new session, in this case Cubase, if I wanted to go new project, here's my two analog summing templates. So I have one here that I created before this video called Vision Analog Mixing Template, and then I have Mixing Template 2, which is the one we just created. So if I were to hit create, and let me just for giggles here, I'll put it on the desktop. And here it is. It's going to load everything up. It's going to load up all our tracks. It's going to load up all of our plugins. It's going to take a few minutes to load, but then we have a good starting point to be able to move on and import our audio and then add the specific types of plugins and effects that you're going to use. So here you go. So here's our template. So that was really quick. So hopefully that was helpful for you. Again, using templates is a real powerful way. And another thing you can do, which I'll do probably in another video, let's say you have, in this case, I'm using the virtual tape machine and I'm using the NLS console emulator by Waves. But let's say you were using some different types of channel strips, maybe an SSL or a Neve or an API. You can set up a template for each one. So if you want to set up, if you're trying to set up your DAW like an analog console, like is what I try to do, I mix in the analog console kind of mindset with vintage gear and vintage plugins. I could have a template set up with all my SSL specific type of plugins and channel strips, another template set up for Neve, another template set up for API. So this way I don't have to keep swapping inserts and plugins in and out. I can just have 4 or 5 different templates, and if I want to mix something that sounds like it has the characteristic of an old SSL console, I pull up my SSL template. If another project comes in and we say, that's a style of music that would sound great through the Neve channel strips, let's pull up the Neve template, etc., etc. So hopefully that was helpful for you. Again, my name is David from homerecordingmadeeasy.com and visionrecordingstudios.com. And for more mixing tips and training, go over to homerecordingmadeeasy.com. Click on the products link at the top of the page and go to the Made Easy series, where you can check out our growing catalog of Made Easy products, which is really geared for beginners and intermediates to learn how to mix and master and how to get better at mixing and production and creating music in your home studio. So until next time, this is Dave from homerecordingmadeeasy.com, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.